Well, good morning, good evening, good day, whatever moment in time that you find yourself watching or listening to this. Announcements for this week. The first very important announcement is this. For this message today, we have some Brookview-led worship included with the message. And so if you want to be a part of that, it will be available if you're watching or listening anytime on Sunday. Actually, just watching. It won't go through the podcast. So if you're online and you are watching on Sunday, you'll go to brookviewchurch.com, and you might want to do that right now, because if you have clicked on messages and you're following through YouTube, you won't have access to the Brookview-led worship that will happen after the message today. So you go to brookviewchurch.com and you see that blue box and you click on that, and there will be a video there, and you can maximize the screen that's there and then see the service in its entirety. So go there now if you want that opportunity. If you don't want the Brookview-led worship, my feelings are hurt. Or, okay, maybe it's not Sunday and it's Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, so we'll give you that. I'll just continue on with the announcements. We're continuing to gather kids in Kids Church through online Zoom on Sunday mornings, and we've decided to kind of shift a little bit what we're doing, and we're going to be following the message theme from Sunday mornings and teaching that in Kids Church. With the idea that's twofold. One, your kids are learning what you're learning about. The other thing is to address this reality that maybe for some of you, you're having a hard time watching the message or listening to the message because you have a lot of newness with kids in your space all the time. And so what we've done is we've encouraged kids to kind of push their parents to watching the message with the idea that they'll sit down and entertain themselves. And we have offered some online sermon notes for them that you can print out, and those are distributed to you through email, and they can color along while they're listening. And so they're just kind of rehearing what they've heard on Sunday morning as you're sitting down together as a family. And so if that's helpful for you, we want you to know that that is available. If you're not on our Brookview parent email list and you would like to be, we would love for you to go to brookviewchurch.com and click on Contact Us and fill out the online communication card there and ask for to be added to our Brookview parent email list, and we'd love to be able to connect with you. I am so blown away and grateful for how you have responded as a community to this idea that we had. We posted this last week and said, hey, we have decided to put up this little pantry with the idea that it will help our Briar community and neighbors and people at Brookview that might be finding themselves in need in this season, and they can come at any time and pick up anything. And then at the end of a week, we will gather up the bulk of what's there. We'll leave some things on the shelves for people to come and get, and then we will forward those items on to Vision House and the Nourishing Network. And so we just kind of let those shelves sit for a week, and we came back today to find this. How cool. Thank you for that. And we don't even know if people came and picked up stuff this week. This could just be the balance of what was left. And so we want to know that that continues to be there. And if you find yourself in a hard spot, come to the church, pick up some items, fill your pantry, take as many as you need. There's no shame in it. There's no video cameras that are watching you. Just come, and we want to bless you. And so for those of you that feel like, gosh, in this season, I've been blessed and I want to be able to give back, this is a very tangible way that you can do that. And so we just invite you to come to the church and drop stuff off on the stairs at that pantry. I didn't change the picture from last week. Jason pointed out that it wasn't the best picture of him, but a girl's got to work during the week. I don't have time to upload pictures and stuff. So Jason's Zoom meetings are still available online on Thursdays. Those are kind of a pop in, pop out. You don't have to make a big commitment to be there every single Thursday. But if you just want to see some familiar faces, you want to be able to connect with other people on spiritual things that are tied to the message message from Sunday morning, we just invite you. And the way that you do that is you go and you fill out the online communication card at brookviewchurch.com and sign up for that Zoom link, and we will get in touch with you. You have to sign up for that link by 6 o'clock. 5 o'clock, I'm changing my mind, 5 o'clock on Thursday so that we can get you that link, because the Huguenin family eats dinner and then Jason does the Zoom meeting. And so if you catch him just before that, we won't have the opportunity to get you into that meeting. We are getting very excited and starting to dream and plan a little bit for Ignite, which for sure now will be happening online. I'm sure that you all saw the governor's order, and we are not going to be able to be in our space before the end of May. And so mark your calendars for Sunday, May 17th from 8 to 9:30 p.m. We call Ignite Brookview's family meeting, and it will be that. It will be an update on how we have seen God moving in this season, how he has provided and blessed us, and then just kind of what's going on and what's going on in the future. So will you come to that? We would so love to have you be a part of that. We also, at that time, for those of you that are Brookview partners, we vote in new board members, and we have a new board member that will be added to our board, and we need your vote on that. So come to Ignite on May 17th. Essentially, how you sign up for that is the day of. It will look a lot like that very first screen. I was going to try and go back to it. It's not going to work. But when you go to brookviewchurch.com, how it says, click here for that live service, it'll say click here for Ignite, and you'll be able to navigate to that Zoom link very easily. So that is how you mark your calendar now and then go to the website to join us for that. I do want to point out online giving is available to you. And for those of you that have shifted and you've started to give online, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your generosity. And it's been a really big deal in this season. That's it.
All right, before I roll into the message today, I have an announcement that Jen has asked me to make. And if you just watched all of the announcements, you're going to be like, she just said that. I know that. But here's what we're thinking. Some of you don't watch all the announcements and you skip right ahead to, to the other thing. And so she asked me to point this out. If you're watching this right now and you're on YouTube, and it is Sunday, May 3rd, we actually, for this weekend, have Brookview worship that's attached to the video, but not on YouTube, because we can't do that for copyright issues. So you would, in order to watch that, to watch the message as well as the worship that follows, you would have to go to brookviewchurch.com, and there will be a splash screen right there for you to get into this message, watch the message, watch the announcements also, because you didn't see those, and then worship with us. So it's a very, very cool deal. All right, we are in this series called The Mountain, and we are looking at the most famous sermon of Jesus, what's known as the Sermon on the Mount. Now, if you read the Gospels for very long, something hits you pretty quick. The people in Jesus' day had some really messed up ideas about spiritual life. They seemed to care a lot more about looking good than actually being good. They seem to care a lot more about image than about heart. Now, thankfully, our culture has advanced so that we have completely grown beyond all of that. Right? So, all throughout his message on the hillside that day, Jesus continually says, hey, you've heard it said, but I tell you. And then he follows it with something. Hey, you've heard it said this, I tell you this. And then he moves on to another topic. You've heard it said, but I tell you. And meaning that you have tried to live life this way, but I've come to show you a better way. And today, Jesus addresses this pressure that we all feel to just look good, to look good. So here we go. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus goes off. This is great. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. So Jesus has talked about giving to the needy, and he's talked about praying just to look good. So let's skip down to verse 16. Jesus takes this same approach here with fasting. He says, and when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do. They disfigure their faces to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Question. Have you ever done a good thing just so other people would notice you? In fact, if we were to get brutally honest and really let this run deep, how many of the good things that we do are truly for any other reason? I mean, I think that the thing is, that's kind of hard to know because the human capacity for self-deception is immense. But there's this raging debate in the world of psychology about the word altruism. Are human beings ever capable of doing good simply for goodness sake? Can human beings ever do good without some other kind of ulterior motives? Well, here, Jesus seems to have a lot to say about this. And so let's dive into this and let's unpack it. Here we go. Chapter 6, verse 1. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. Okay, if you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Now let's pause because this is a confusing passage. What are acts of righteousness? What does that mean? And is it truly wrong to allow people to see them? I mean, Jesus says that if we do, we will get no reward from God. Well, what in the world does that mean? What reward? So let's walk through these concepts. The Greek word translated righteousness can also be translated good works. And in front of others to be seen is often translated just to be admired. So here's the same verse from the New Living Translation, and I really like this translation of it. Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. I also find the Bible scholar Eugene Peterson's translation super helpful. I think this is also very, very good. He writes this, be especially careful when you're trying to be good so that you don't make a performance out of it. It might be good theater, but the God who made you won't be applauding. So in this passage, it's not so much about being unseen or doing everything we do in secret as much as it's about performing. Jesus is not saying hide all your good works. Like, whenever you do good stuff, you have to make sure you do it in secret. For one thing, that would be impossible, right? Practically speaking. But for another thing, it actually contradicts something that Jesus said earlier in the very same talk that he gave. I mean, if you remember at the beginning of the sermon, Jesus talks about us being salt and being light. He says, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And then he adds, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Well, that's weird, right? So Jesus wants us to do good deeds that are visible. That's all part of his vision for his people. But it's about not doing them just to get attention. It's just to perform. He's warning us about doing things just to impress people. He's warning us about only doing good to get attention. Question. If you do a really cool, Jesus-y thing, should you try to broadcast it all over? I mean, should you just keep posting about it on Instagram? Well, the real question is this just about me getting attention? Is this just about me getting attention? I mean, is it okay that we broadcast good stuff that our church is doing on Facebook? Even on the Briar Community Facebook page? Is that okay? Is it okay that we tell people about the food pantry and what's going on and what we're doing? Well, if it's just about us wanting as a church to get a pat on the back from our community, then no. We shouldn't be broadcasting that. But if it informs and it inspires other people to participate, if it mobilizes people to join us and do good with us, then yes, we should be broadcasting that. What you have to watch out for is showing off, okay, the humble brag. Just airing your good deeds so that everyone's like, oh, wow, you're amazing. So I think we could summarize the idea with this. Jesus is saying, when you do good works, don't do them to show off. Now, this raises an issue. Is it wrong to want people to praise you? Is it wrong? Is that always wrong? Is it wrong to want people to celebrate good things with you? Hypothetical. Okay, if you were a student at George Fox University and you got an A on your final in your proofs class, and it sealed for you an A in a really tough class, would it be wrong to say to your dad, who hypothetically is doing push-ups on the living room floor? Okay, so this did not happen. This is a hypothetical. Did not happen at my house on Thursday morning at around 11:15 a.m. This is totally hypothetical. Would it be wrong to say, Dad, I got an A on my proofs final. That means I got an A in this class, which was so hard for me. I didn't think I could do it. Would that be a sin? Would it be wrong to tell your dad about it? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And we're going to talk more about that as we go along today. Okay, but how about this? What if you post it on Instagram? Does that cross the line? What if your dad were to broadcast it on YouTube? Would that be a sin? It probably would be. So the cool thing is, this is totally a hypothetical. Question. Is it wrong to want my family and my friends and the people around me to celebrate me sometimes? Is it wrong to invite people into my moments of joy? Well, here's what I think. I think there is something incredibly human about that. I think that there's something very beautiful about that. And so we need to think hard about that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it. Jesus is talking here specifically about good works, doing good. And he's saying, when you do good works, don't do them just to show off. Now, in this example, he's talking about giving to the poor, which is a very, very good thing. And he says, but your motivation also matters. And I think that we would all agree with that. We would. I mean, if a wealthy celebrity gives a bunch of money to a good cause and does it very publicly, And they like have their publicist there to make a really big deal about it, and it becomes obvious to everybody that this is really just all about PR for the celebrity, that it's all about image management and self-promotion, then the financial gift that they're giving to a good cause is still a really good thing for the world. But there's something kind of shallow about it, right? So we would agree, our motivation matters. When it comes to all kinds of spiritual practices, which is what Jesus has in view here, then we all face this temptation, this dilemma. We're tempted to do the right things, but for the wrong reasons. We can actually do like really good things for very selfish or very narcissistic reasons. For example, I'm up here and I am teaching the way of Jesus. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Thank you. Yes, I agree. I think it's a great thing. Okay? But here's the reality. You have no idea why I'm up here. You can't see into my heart or even deeper into my soul. You have no idea what my motivation really is. You can guess at it. Some of you online right now, you might be really skeptical about it, but you can't actually see into my soul. Now, I could be up here. Because I love Jesus deeply. And I want to serve Jesus with my life. And this feels like something I was made to do. And I love all of you a ton. And I love all of you a ton. And I just want to serve you. And I feel like God has given me this role in this community. I could be up here for that reason. In theory. In theory, I could. Or I could be up here because this is my job. Right? This is my job, and I have kids to feed and tuition to pay at George Fox University, and that's not hypothetical. This is my job. And Casey just spoke recently, and really I wanted the weekend off, but here I am. Or even worse, I could be up here because I'm a complete narcissist. I just love to hear the sound of my own voice. I love being on a mic. I like having spotlights on me. I like being seen by you. I like being on YouTube. I'm an egomaniac infatuated with views on social media because I want to dominate the world. And some of you are like, wow, like I was already cynical. Now I know. Now, all three of these are hypotheticals. Kind of, right? Because it's not like my motivation is 100% pure, ever. The reality is I'm a mixed bag. I'm up here for some really good reasons, but then there's all this other junk that gets mixed up with it, and I'm trying to work through all of that. And so I just want to say to all of you, don't judge me. I mean, let's be serious. Don't judge me. And before you get all judgy, like, well, every pastor should just have the heart of Jesus, listen here. How many of you will go to work tomorrow morning, and you'll be in your cubicle or in front of your computer at home, and your day will start at 7:30 a.m. or whatever, and the only thought in your mind will be, I'm here to contribute to human flourishing. And that's it. Like, really? Come on, man. Come on. Now, there may be moments where you actually are, yay, human flourishing. But in the other moments, it's like, oh, man, another freaking email. Why am I here just like working for the man, right? So don't judge me. The question you have to ask yourself with regularity, the question that I especially need to ask because of my job in particular, because of the occupational hazard that my job just has attached to it, the question that Jesus wants to ask ourselves is this: why am I doing this good thing? Whenever we're doing a good thing, why am I doing this good thing? Whether it's teaching the way of Jesus, or it's giving to charity, or it's mentoring a kid, or you name it, the question is, what's my motivation? Why am I doing this? Now, verse 1 of chapter 6 is basically a thesis statement. It's the main point for this whole section of teaching from Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. Chapter 6, verse 1, all the way to verse 18. And this is the verse. He says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." And Jesus is challenging his listeners and us to consider motivation for 3 spiritual practices. The first is giving to the poor, the second is prayer, and then the third is fasting. And Jesus uses these 3 examples. You're like, why did he pick those 3 examples? Well, because of his culture. Because in his day, these were the big 3 core spiritual practices. These were the big 3. And I think it's just good to recognize that different generations have focused on different spiritual practices as being kind of the core. Now, for us in our day, those would definitely not necessarily be the big 3, maybe prayer, but giving to the poor and fasting, definitely not. For us, what would be the big 3? I don't know, depends on your Christian culture that you're coming from, but for many of us, it would be maybe Bible reading and prayer and going to church. And that's great. And I think all those things are really, really good. But in Jesus' day, the world was very different. First of all, nobody had a Bible. It's not like you just had a Bible sitting on the counter at home. I mean, an entire community might have only one copy of the scriptures for the entire village. And it would be located at the synagogue. So like daily Bible reading or scripture reading wasn't just not even feasible for them. And as far as going to church, they would have called it synagogue. And imagine, you're living in a village, and there's a few hundred people, and the synagogue is the absolute epicenter of community life. It is the local elementary school, it's the community center, it's the worship center, it's the justice center, it's the house of government, it's the welfare system, it is all of that. So if you were a Jew in Jesus' day, you were pretty much at synagogue every single day. You'd go there all through the week. And it just didn't play the same role for them. They didn't think of it the same way that we do church in our culture. So the core spiritual practices have shifted from their time to our time. And that makes sense. It makes sense because the world has changed. Their core practices were giving to the needy, prayer, and fasting. But here, Jesus doesn't do like an in-depth teaching on each one. Instead, what he's doing is he's warning his apprentices of the danger of religious hypocrisy, the danger of getting sucked into doing these practices, which are all great, and Jesus is all for all of them, but getting sucked into doing them in order to just look good in front of other people. Now, earlier, I read his warnings about all 3. For the sake of time today, we're just going to focus on the first warning because the reality is all 3 make the same point. So let's just focus on the first. Let's look at his warning about giving to the needy. He says, "So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full." Now, this picture that Jesus gives of announcing our giving with trumpets is kind of hilarious to me. Actually, I mean, if you think about that, you're like, anytime you're going to write a check or give something, it's like, what is that? So, for us, that's kind of a foreign idea. We hear that, and I don't know about for you, for me, it conjures up all these pictures, and I think, well, did wealthier people just go out into the streets of Israel and Jerusalem and all that and give to beggars, and they would invite a trumpeter to go with them, and right before they gave out some change, the trumpeter, and then you throw your change down to the beggar. Well, as far as we know, nobody did that. So this is kind of a weird reference. Jesus' reference to the trumpets here is not that. But here's what it is, and I think this is awesome. Jesus' reference to the trumpets here is actually a super clever play on words. Here's what he's doing with this reference. Inside of each synagogue, there was a giving box, okay, and it was made from a ram's horn, okay, a shofar, which a shofar was used as this giving box, but could also be used as a trumpet. So when you'd walk into synagogue, you would take your coin or your coins, your denarii that you're going to give, and you would throw them into the ram's horn. And guess what? It made a really loud noise, right? This clanging and clamoring of change going down through the ram's horn. So when you walked in, if you gave a lot and you threw a lot of coin in there, you essentially could walk into the back of the synagogue and announce your presence. You throw a bunch of coins in there and it's just like the chimes are going off and it's crazy. So everyone would turn, they would hear somebody come in and all kinds of money's going into that thing, and people would turn and be really impressed. Like, wow, that's amazing. You must really love God. So Jesus is saying, listen, when you walk into synagogue, like on a Sabbath morning or whatever, and you give to the needy, because giving to that was giving to the needy, it was the welfare system, that's great. It's really, really good. But don't announce it to the world. You don't have to stand at a distance as far away from that ram's horn as you can get and throw them in there like basketball style, one at a time, right? Or try to drop them from real high so there's just bump, 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 down through the deal. He's like, you don't have to do that. That's what the hypocrites do. It's all to get applause, and it's all about getting recognition from other people. Now, it's interesting because this is the first time that Jesus uses a word that later becomes a Jesus-ism. Okay, it's Greek. It's hypokrites, which became the word, anybody want to guess? Hypocrite in English. And if you read Matthew or the other Gospels, you see that Jesus used this word a lot to highlight and point out spiritual inauthenticity. But it's interesting because as far as we know, prior to Jesus, this word did not have a negative meaning to anybody. It didn't mean in their culture, it didn't mean somebody who doesn't practice what they preach, and it didn't mean someone who judges other people for things that they do themselves. In Jesus' day, does anybody know what that word meant? An actor, exactly. It was just an actor on stage, someone pretending to be somebody they're not. And this was an image that all his hearers would immediately connect with because there were theaters all over in that century, in that time. In fact, a few miles from where Jesus grew up was Sepphoris. Do we have that image? Yeah, it was Sepphoris, which was it was a Roman city, okay, where this giant theater was built. And this city and this theater were built over a number of years, but they were constructed during Jesus' late childhood and young adulthood, which is interesting with Jesus having been in the construction business. The Greek word tekton, which gets translated most often carpenter, actually described a far wider range of things than just like woodworking. It meant craftsman, it meant construction worker or stonemason. And a lot of people will sort of envision Jesus, the carpenter, right? And he's got his lathe and he's always making tables and doing fine woodworking, right? That's the vision. But in reality, the kind of work he was doing was much better than that. And he probably worked with stone a lot more than he worked with wood. And for some of you, that's throwing you into existential crisis because you're like, no, my boss is a Jewish carpenter. And it's like, no, sorry, he was actually a stonemason. But, okay, here's what's kind of cool and interesting about all of that. A lot of scholars speculate that Jesus actually helped build the city of Sepphoris, and that likely Jesus and his father, Joseph, helped build this theater. And this is just a few miles from where Jesus grew up. But there were theaters all over Israel. So this image, an actor on a stage, was very well known to people, just like it is today. So you get the image, right? Jesus is saying, look, the religious leaders are hypocrites. They're actors. They're pretending to be something they're not. They're not the real deal. So don't follow them and don't try to imitate them. And he's exposing religious hypocrisy for the sham that it actually is. So a number of language scholars believe that the use of the word hypocrite, the way that it's now used in our culture and all over the world as this big negative sort of term, originally entered Western thinking through Jesus. Jesus was actually the first to call out religious hypocrisy as hypocrisy. And when you think about that, I think that's kind of stunning. It wasn't a term that was coined by some atheist, Richard Dawkins or some critic of faith. It was actually Jesus. Religious hypocrisy really bothered the world, and the truth is it really bothers most of us. And the cool thing is, if that's you and it bothers you, you should know it really bothers Jesus too. Because it is a death blow to the witness of his followers and of the church. But here's what's interesting. In this passage, that's not the problem that Jesus seems to be having with it. He doesn't say, hey, don't be a hypocrite because that'll turn people off to me and the life that I've come to offer the world. Now, he might think that. Like if you were to suggest that, he might nod and go, well, that's true. But that's not the issue here. His issue here is, look at the screen. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. Why shouldn't you be a hypocrite? Well, because if you're a hypocrite, then you have received your reward in full. Jesus is saying, look, if you give to the needy or you do anything else good, you pray, you fast, you mentor a kid, or you serve in a soup kitchen or whatever, but you do whatever that thing is you do just for the approval of people, then fine, that's good. It's still a good thing to do. You might get what you want, like a pat on the back, a little clap, comment on your Instagram page, right? Oh, you're amazing. That's wonderful. The world is so blessed to have you. Or whatever. But the point Jesus is making is that's all you'll get. That's it. So notice, and we'll talk about this in a minute, Jesus is he's not down on doing good works, and he's not down on doing good works for a reward. He just thinks if the reward you seek is applause from people, you're setting your sights way too low because there's so much more that the Father has for you. And now Jesus shows us the better way. Verse 3, he says, "But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret." What does that even mean? Right? This is the solution. It's like, what? What are you talking about? How do you do that? How do you give so that your left hand doesn't know what your right hand is doing, your right hand doesn't know what your left... it doesn't matter. He's saying that the more we follow him and we apprentice under him, and this is the point, the more we follow him and the more we apprentice under him, the more we will grow and mature. And the goal is to become the kind of people who naturally do Jesus-y things without even thinking about it, much less thinking of it. The goal is to eventually become the kind of people who do good things, and it all just seems normal to us. It's not doing good, it's just living, baby. The good we're doing just doesn't feel like or seem like to us a big deal. Because how else would we live? And you see what he's saying? When deeply good deeds just seem normal to us, then we've finally become the sort of people whose left hand would not notice what its right hand is doing. And this is what happens, really, when you think about it, this is what happens anytime we learn a new skill. This is how it works, any new skills. When we first are able to do something, we think, wow, look what I just did, right? But after we get more and more and more skilled, that thing seems kind of normal to us, and it doesn't catch our attention. Okay, just a simple example. All of my kids have been basketball players, and there was a day for every one of them when they started shooting layups, okay, with their offhand, with their left hand. And at first, for every single one of them, it was very hard. In fact, it felt virtually impossible. But they kept at it, and they kept at it, and then they started to make them every once in a while in drills. And then every once in a while, they would make them in like a scrimmage setting, and then the first one came in a real game. But eventually, they've all become skilled enough that that's no longer a really big deal. Like making a left-handed layup in a game is not worth celebrating. It just becomes, we don't go, oh, that's amazing. We just call it basketball. Right? I mean, if my daughter who plays at George Fox stopped in a game after making a left-handed layup and looked up in the stands and pointed at Dad, you'd be like, grow up. Okay? They just don't look for the applause anymore. But 8-year-old Kate, when she made her first one in a game, she looked up in the stands and I was like, way to go. The point of becoming mature in Christ is that this is the same thing that happens to us. Eventually, being generous and being kind and being patient, they're not amazing. Like loving people who don't love us, that's not amazing. That's just living. And then Jesus adds this beautiful ending to it all. He says, then, okay, when you don't need applause for every good deed, then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, this is fascinating to me because I think that there's something in us that protests this just a little bit, right? I mean, Jesus is saying, hey, the wrong motivation for doing good work is the applause of people around you. We all go, okay, that makes sense. I'm totally 100% on board for that. I don't know how to do it, but I'm on board with that I should do it. But now he's saying, okay, so that's the wrong motivation. The right motivation for doing good work is this, to get a reward from your Father in heaven. Is it me, or does that sound like super self-serving? In Western culture, we have developed a high value for what we call altruism. And if you read philosophy, it was Immanuel Kant who said, do the right thing because it's what? The right thing. The old, the Christmas song that we just love says, be good for what? Goodness sake. Be good for goodness sake. The idea, you shouldn't need a pat on the back or a reward of any kind. Okay, just do the right thing because it's the right thing. And of course, that's not bad. That's a good thing. It's fine. It's really, really good. But what we see here is that Jesus was actually a little bit more of a realist about the human condition. And he had deep insight into our engine of motivation. So notice, Jesus doesn't say, hey, be good for goodness sake. No, Jesus says, do good because your Father will see it, and guess what? He'll reward you. Now, he doesn't say what the reward is, and so we have to be very careful not to fill in the blank. Well, if I write a check to Young Life or to the Nourishing Network or to World Vision, then I know God's going to see that, and he's going to bless me, and I'm going to get a promotion, and then I'm going to get a Tesla. And so what I'm doing, I mean, I'm writing in the check. I'm like, okay, here we go, World Vision, $40, and then in the section down the bottom, I write in down payment for a new Tesla. That's actually not how it works. So Jesus is not, he wants us to be, he's not telling us what the reward is. We have to be very careful to define what it is. Jesus just says, do good, and the Father will see you and notice you, and you will be rewarded. Not do the right thing because it's the right thing, and that's all the motivation you need. Instead, it's even if no one else sees, your Father will see you. He will notice you, and you will be blessed. Now, it's interesting because if you study human nature, it is inherent in all of us, this desire to be noticed. We have it, and it runs deep. We are born with the desire to be noticed. We come out of the womb literally crying for attention. And as kids grow, they have this phrase that they use all the time. If you're around very many little kids, they use this all the time, especially around a pool. Does anybody know what it is? Oh, that's Apparently the Spirit's moving. Watch me, right? This is like, be hanging around little kids. Watch me, daddy, watch me, mommy, watch me, brother, watch me, uncle, watch me, creepy man by the van outside the fence, right? Like, watch me. And if you've ever been sitting poolside with kids that are swimming, it can be almost nauseating, like you're trying to read or something, and it's all you can hear. Watch me, watch me, watch me. It's drive you crazy. Watch this, daddy. Watch this, mommy. Watch me. And here's what I've been wondering over the years as I've been watching this phenomenon. I'm wondering if it's like psychologically impossible for a kid to do a cannonball without somebody watching. Is that even possible? Okay, sweetheart, that was amazing. That was the biggest splash of the year, right? Like, and it isn't just mom and dad, right? It's grandma, grandpa, it's random stranger. Watch me, see me, notice me, celebrate me. Kids need approval and kids need attention. Like, to flourish, they need it. Watch me play piano. Watch me build my Legos. Watch me play basketball. Watch me draw. Put down your phone, set aside whatever else you're thinking about, all your stress from work or whatever, and notice me. Pay attention to me. See me. See my really cool drawing of a dinosaur killing 100 ninjas, or whatever it is, right? And as a dad, I have felt this 1,000 times from each one of my kids. Notice me, approve of me. They just need me to say, I see you, and this is so good. Great job, Kate. Great job, Cam. Way to go, Cam. That's amazing, Brookie. And when children don't get this, and this is what's horribly sad, when they don't get this, especially from their father for whatever reason, but when children don't get this from their parents or from other people in the community or their family, when someone's not doing this for them, they end up wounded, and we know they'll end up looking for it in all kinds of other places. And this can play out in so many strange ways. Some people brag all the time. For some people, they try to be subtle, and so it's the humble brag. For other people, it's the blatant brag. Some people post on social media nonstop, and then they look back at it all day long. How many people see me? How many people like me? How many people are paying attention to me? Some people will become obsessed with success. You sacrifice everything in life for success. Some people will seek community in all kinds of unhealthy things. Gangs, if that's what's available and that's all they can get. Gangs, drugs, alcohol, being bad. But so often, these kinds of behaviors are not a sign that a person is inherently a bad person or a wicked person or evil. They're a reaction. Someone didn't feel seen or noticed or celebrated enough in a previous season of life. And often they didn't feel seen and approved of, sadly, by their dad. And before you go, hey, you're being all sexist, I'm just saying, think about your life. Think about the power of dads. It's amazing to me. And so now they're navigating life carrying this deep father wound, and here they are 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 or even 70 years old, and they're trying to get what they never got from their dad, from other people, or what they didn't get from adults, or what they didn't get from their community or the parents or whoever it was. And it can get so destructive, and it rarely ends well. Our healthy desire to be seen and rewarded by our Father, just with relationship, I'm talking about our human Father, just with relationship, just with His smile, just with His pleasure over us, can easily become, especially if we grow up in a greater degree of brokenness, it quickly becomes this obsessive desire to be noticed and to look good in front of other people. And if that happens, then we jump onto the hamster wheel, right? This is what happens. This is what it feels like. It's like you run and you tweet and you post and you brag and you succeed and you accomplish and you show off and you accumulate, and yet you never, ever get anywhere. Is there freedom from that? What would liberate us from that? Is there freedom from that? And the answer is yes. Now, whenever you read the Bible, and we've been talking a lot about this, especially in this series, you have to kind of live with one foot in two different worlds. You have one foot in Jesus' world, okay, first century Israel, very conservative, very religious, very oppressed. And then you live with one foot in the other world, our world, 21st century life in the Pacific Northwest, very liberal culture, extremely affluent. And you have to do the hard work of somehow reading the Bible in both contexts. In Jesus' context, right? And then again, in our context. And when you oscillate between the two, and you kind of do this regularly, and you think, especially about the Sermon on the Mount, we could just kind of go back and forth, and you oscillate between the two, you realize that there are a lot of similarities, and yet there's a lot of differences, right? Sometimes you're reading something, and it's like, oh, wow, that's really similar to our world. But other times it's like, whoa, like that's nothing like our world at all. Now, on the hill, Jesus was speaking to a very religious, very conservative Jewish audience. And they were devoted to certain religious practices. Everybody did them. In particular, giving to the needy, prayer, and fasting. Is that similar to our context? Yeah, not so much. But on the other hand, there's one striking similarity in this passage. There's one massive similarity between their world and ours. In Jesus' world, people really wanted to look good in front of others. And I'll tell you what I think. I think we live in a culture that is even more obsessed with image than they were. We're far more concerned with looking good than actually being good. We're far more interested in applause and accolades from people than we are the attention and the approval of the Father. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting always trying to keep up. We have to stay cool, be cool. We have to be informed, right? We have to have read the latest article or the book or seen the latest meme, or I don't even know what a meme is really, but I'm going to say it like I do because I want to look like I'm up to date. We got to stay up to. We have to allow our emotional state to rise or fall based on what people are or are not saying about us, and we end up being pressed into the stereotype from our culture, some stereotype, whatever our culture thinks we ought to be, rather than living out our identity and our calling from God. It's living under the tyranny of approval addiction, and it is suffocating, is it not? The truth is, this teaching of Jesus, I don't believe, could come to us in a greater cultural moment. How do we break free? How do we get off the hamster wheel? And for some of you, you're listening to this or whatever, and you're like, well, this isn't really a big deal for me right now in my life. Great. I applaud you. God bless. But for many of you, at times, maybe even right now, you are suffocating under this. You're imprisoned constantly by what other people think of you. So how do we break free from the tyranny of having to look good? How do we break free from approval addiction? Well, in this passage, Jesus gives us a very small, very simple step to take. And so for him, in this teaching that's in front of us, it's very simple. If that's where you and I are at and we want freedom, then Jesus says, okay, here's what you do. And by the way, I just want to say, all of this is invitation. It's just an invitation. You don't have to do this. But if you want to be free, Jesus is saying, okay, start with this. Do something good this week and don't tell anyone about it. Go do something Jesus-y. And that sounds like ambiguous. I know. You're like, well, what would that be? Could be anything. Just something that you know is good, something that you know God would be in favor of, and then don't tell anyone about it. Don't post it on social media. Don't tell your life group. This week I was FaceTiming with my 4-year-old mentee, and it just brings me so much joy to know that I'm having this impact on this young soul. Don't Marco Polo your best friends just dropping off food at the food pantry. So good to have food and bless and be a blessing. And then here's where you really begin to feel the freedom. When you do whatever good thing you might do, then don't just leave it at that, but pause for just a moment and envision your Heavenly Father, like literally imagine His face. Just imagine His pleasure and His delight over you. Now, you're not earning His love. I want to be clear about that. You're not earning His love because you already have it. You already have as much of it as you could ever get, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done in your life. He loves you. He already loves you. Just like I already loved my kids before they could make left-handed layups. I did. I know it's shocking, but I did. But when they made their very first one and they looked at me, I'll tell you what they saw. They saw it in my face. So as you do your good thing this week, here's what I'm inviting you to do, and here's what Jesus is inviting you to do. Imagine your Father's face. Imagine Him looking at you and seeing you and delighting in you. And here's what will really enable you to find freedom. This is the next step. Let yourself feel God's delight in you. Let yourself feel God's delight in you. Why? Because this is what you were wired to do. God has designed you to need this and to receive and experience life from this. You can't actually live a full life without this. If you try to live without this, you jump on the hamster wheel, you spend your entire life feeling like, why is something missing in my life? Why don't I have, there's something that I need and I can't put my finger on it. I'll tell you what you need. Let yourself feel God's delight in you. And I just want to say something. I want to end with something that I think some of you need to hear. God delights in you. He delights in you because He loves you. He delights in you because you are you. There is no other you. He delights in you because you are you, and guess what? He thought you up. He delights in you because you are His child, whether you're responding to Him or running from Him. Ultimately, you are His child, and good fathers delight in their children. They just do. So no matter what you do, He delights in you. But when you grow and you take a new step or you learn a new skill or you do something really Jesus-y for the first time, or maybe you do it in a deeper way, or you do it for just not to look good to other people, He sees you. He sees you and He notices you. And I think some of you need to know, you have taken so many steps in recent years. You've gone way beyond left-handed layups. What used to be hard for you, being patient or being generous or being kind, it's now becoming second nature for you. Do you realize that God sees that too? He notices, and He's cheering for it, and He delights in you. So here's how you break free from the hamster wheel. You allow yourself to feel God's delight in you. Not because you've earned it, because you're better than other people, but simply because He loves you that much. You guys, it's not wrong to want to be noticed and appreciated. It's not wrong. And if you try to live your life without that stuff, it's going to be empty and it's going to be hard. It's human. You've been designed so that you actually need it to flourish. The thing is, you just need to know where to go looking for it. And this, guys, is the invitation from Jesus to us in this passage. It's beautiful.